IRS documents recently uncovered by some reporters show that Peter Thiel, one of the founders of PayPal, has over $5 billion in his Roth IRA. And if you're not familiar, having all this money in a Roth IRA means that when Thiel chooses to withdraw these funds, at least once he's 59 and a half years old, he can get all of that money out completely tax-free. Thiel was able to build up this massive tax-free balance by buying or assigning some of the PayPal shares to himself in its very early stages within his Roth IRA. The shares were worth less than 1 penny a piece at the time, and so he was able to get millions of shares in the account because the company was basically worthless since it was just being formed. But within the first year, his Roth IRA had already grown to $3.8 million. And this is an account that has an annual contribution limit right now of $6,000 or $7,000. But back then, in the late 1990s, it was $2,000 per year. And as the value of PayPal shares rose more throughout the years, his tax-free wealth continued to rise as well. He made a couple other also very lucrative investments within the Roth IRA, one example being Facebook in its very early days. And these, along with the main PayPal holding, are what helped this account grow exponentially. As of last year, it was shown that Thiel's Roth IRA account is now split up between 96 different investment positions and probably more diversified than it was in its early days of just being all invested in PayPal, so he just has to wait about 5 or 6 more calendar years till he can get all that diversified money out completely tax-free. So we're going to talk about how Thiel was able to pull this feat off and if this is a form of manipulation of the tax code in which the IRS is trying to give regular people like you and me favorable treatment towards some of their after-tax retirement savings. Should people really be able to build up billion-dollar nest eggs in tax-sheltered accounts? It's debatable.
Okay, so one of the first big questions I had about this story is how the heck this can even happen. If you're someone who's familiar with Roth IRAs, you'll know that you can buy publicly traded stocks in your Roth IRA account all day long. If you're even more keen on Roths than the average person, you've probably also heard of people who buy real estate within their Roth IRA account. But shares of privately held stock when you're just starting up a company in a Roth is new to me. Thiel, being one of the founders of PayPal, along with a select few other individuals who were there in the very early stages, were able to get access to those startup shares. Unfortunately, to someone in his scenario, traditional brokerage services will limit the assets that you can buy within a Roth IRA to assets that they can custody, such as publicly traded companies like stocks or ETFs or mutual funds. However, there are some trust companies that differ from traditional brokerages in that they will let you buy alternative assets in your Roth IRA account. So Thiel worked with a trust company like this when opening his Roth IRA in 1999 to deposit his first $2,000. From what I've read on this now, you really need to know the rules when you're getting into buying alternative assets through trust companies in retirement accounts. But it looks like Thiel had the right people around him because he was successfully able to buy, or really just assign, his privately held PayPal shares, which were valued at 0.1 cents per share, in this trust-held Roth IRA. Then when PayPal was purchased by Yahoo in 2003, his Roth IRA quickly ballooned to not just the couple $1 million we talked about already, but a few $1 billion. Most or all of the cash proceeds that Thiel received from that PayPal deal, he just makes out in a check and mails the check to the trust company so that that balance is reflected in his Roth. In my opinion, this sort of sounds like playing the lottery, but in a retirement account. Of course, it's clear that PayPal is a very valuable business now and millions of people use it every day, but back in the early stages when Thiel was founding it, it was no different than anyone else starting up like a lawn care or a fintech company out of their garage. So I'm sure Thiel was very confident in what he was building back in 1999, but from a statistical perspective, it is like a total crapshoot and you're able to do it in a retirement account. So again, I think it's like playing the lottery. Then the question about fairness, should someone be able to have billions of dollars in a tax-free retirement account, sort of needs to be addressed or answered using that lottery comparison. I say this because obviously it's totally fair for someone to buy a publicly traded stock that does extremely well and build up a huge sum of money in a tax-free retirement account. But when it's this privately held startup thing held through a trust company, it's very different. So it doesn't feel very fair. But the IRS or Department of Labor, when they're looking at retirement account rules, they don't really care about feelings, and on paper, everything that Thiel did was totally correct here. Again, while he was probably confident back then, from all of our perspectives, it was a crapshoot, and so he kind of took a gamble at this, and it obviously paid off really well, but it's not like this was a sure thing that he took advantage of, because there's no telling if it would have been successful early on or not. He also gets more flack around this because he's an outspoken libertarian, which is a political party who generally dislikes higher taxes or tax taxes at all. He's talked publicly about how he wants to found some sort of self-governing private island where there's no like governmental organization and no one pays any taxes and things like that. Those relatively radical beliefs can really give people who are firing shots at him more ground to hold on to when they are, calling him a bad person. But he was just making some smart moves from a tax perspective early on that every other person in his scenario probably would have tried to take advantage of if they were aware of it at the time and very confident in the future growth of their business. But the part of this story that is getting even less coverage than the fact that he has a lot of money in his Roth and is potentially less ethical than the fact that he even has all this money is how the information was made public about this. ProPublica is the company or publisher who got hold of these tax records about Thiel and several other millionaires and billionaires and made this information public. And it is not clear how ProPublica received this information themselves. ProPublica is a liberal or left-leaning organization, so it becomes pretty politically heated when an organization like that starts calling out really rich people for not having to pay much taxes. One theory is that left-leaning or liberal employees within the IRS got this information and were so enraged by it that they decided to leak this once private and confidential, but now very public information to this organization. The FBI was called in to investigate the leaking of Thiel's tax records and many other individuals' tax records to ProPublica. The CEO of ProPublica admitted in an accompanying article that he really didn't have much knowledge about who leaked the information to his firm. So I want to read a quote here. "We have considered the possibility that the information we've received could have come from a state actor hostile to American interests." That doesn't sound great. Now, of course, that one line is probably like a soundbite that some right-leaning political activists may have taken from him to kind of bash the left-leaning organization that he runs. So obviously there's some interest in play here, but still, there's an ethical question on whether or not they should have released this information that they don't even know how they got. While the FBI and IRS are investigating how classified information was leaked to the public, ProPublica is writing article after article after article slamming these very wealthy people for having tax-free retirement accounts built up. Whatever your take on this is, just know that it's very likely these people are going to wait until their qualified retirement age, which in the United States is 59 and a half, to touch any of this money so that they don't pay any penalties or taxes on it. And they will, in fact, especially in Thiel's case, get billions and billions of dollars out of these accounts completely tax-free. What they do with this money could be beneficial to a lot of people. There really aren't many things that you can buy on Earth that are more than $1 billion. There are no houses or yachts or cars. Well, maybe a couple yachts, but not many. So the reality is people with multiple billions of dollars either stash it away in trust accounts for their family to live off of for like hundreds of generations, or they end up becoming extremely philanthropic and they start a foundation that works towards some cause that they are very personally invested in or they care about a lot, or they'll just donate all the money like Mackenzie Bezos has been doing after her recent divorce case to other foundations that put that money to great use for people less fortunate in the world. So I, for one, am not too concerned about these people not paying taxes on this money, even though the United States has a huge debt problem and the IRS is going to get shorted maybe a couple or few $1 billion by these people having had this business growth happen in tax-free retirement accounts. It's just going to increase maybe the outstanding debt that we have by a small margin, and other people throughout the world may get some benefit from this tax-free money too. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. I started an Instagram page pretty recently just because I had a few questions in the comments about people wanting to connect on there, so feel free to follow me on Instagram. It's just Straight Talks YT if you want to, but as always, thanks for watching.